All right, so here's a video from Mr. Dreamcore. Big shout out to him, by the way. Solid content so far. Full PV2 character sheet breakdown, starting stats, base mana regen, and ES recharge. So we're going to look at this. This is a 10-minute-ish video. And again, videos linked in the YouTube chat and Twitch chat. So make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content to him, as well as leave a comment if you like the video. But let's dive into it.
You can stack 2 copies of Shock for more damage.
That's a lot of damage.
And going deeper into the tree, you can make all your damage types apply Shock.
No, that's a lot of damage.
I love this editing with the intro.
We're just 6 days out from the launch of PoE2's early access on December 6th. In this video, I thought it would be interesting to take a look through the character sheet to show which stats will appear here, and how much of an improvement it is from PoE1's character sheet. But also, by going through my footage from the LA event, I've been able to collect information for all of the stats that I had from gear and from the passive skill tree, which means I've been able to essentially reverse engineer a bunch of base character stats, such as how much life and mana you start with, and how much is gained per level, but also stats such as the base mana regeneration percentage and base energy shield recharge rate. So here we are with some of my footage from LA. Let's go over the character sheet first to show layout and what information can be found here. Now, immediately you can see how much of an improvement the character sheet is in PoE2 compared to PoE1. All of the stats are found on the same sheet without the need for additional tabs, and some of the basic stats that are going to be a bit more important for an average character, like life, mana, or basic defense types, are listed at the top in their own sections. You can mouse over each of these sections and you'll get a simple description of that stat. So we have Spirit, ongoing skills such as buffs or minions reserve Spirit. Here's mana, most skills cost mana to use, slowly regenerates over time. We'll get onto that in a moment in a bit more detail. Then there's Energy Shield, protects life by taking damage instead, rapidly recharges if you don't lose ES for a short time. Chaos damage removes twice as much ES, and damage from bleeding and poison bypasses ES to remove life directly. And there's life. If you drop to 0 life, you die of course. And here's the description for armor. Now, just like in PoE1, we're getting an estimated physical reduction here, which I'm not a big fan of because it can be very misleading. But how this estimation works is that it takes your total armor and puts it against a basic physical hit of a normal monster at your character.
Sorry about that, my fiance came in. Armor reduces physical damage you take from both attack spells, but provides no benefit against other damage types. So this is what we have in... they should maybe have it spaced there. So this part here, exact damage reduction depends on the damage dealt, but cannot be higher than 90%. This is how it works in PoE1. Essentially, you're mitigating up to 90% of damage taken. It's not very clear in this display, but what it does in PoE1, which seems to be the same here, is that if you get hit by, say, 10,000 physical damage, and you have 1,000,000 armor, you're going to mitigate 90% of that hit. But the harder the hit becomes, the less effective your armor is to blocking or mitigating that damage. So kind of like the harder the enemy hits, the more armor you're going to need to mitigate the damage. So that's why armor can be very useful in the early stage when you're playing at lower levels, and then as you get into harder and harder content, you're gonna have more armor. And I don't like there is a graph for this somewhere. I can find that later, where you can guarantee having 90% physical damage mitigation for like builds like armor stackers and whatnot. So the way this does is that the harder the enemy is hitting, usually the hardest hitting abilities are well telegraphed that you're not supposed to tank them, you're supposed to dodge them, which emphasizes on this that you are not going to normally be able to stack enough armor to mitigate those big hits that you're supposed to be dodging. An example of this is like a Shaper Slam from PoE1. So that's how that armor system actually works. But it doesn't actually say the details here, which would require a graph and everything. But that's what they mean with it depends on the damage dealt.
Character level to calculate how much mitigation you'd get against that hit. And this is the result of that calculation right here, 33% PDR. The issue...
So, I think Dreamcore's going to mention this, but it also says 33% down here. I'm not sure if they're going to base that off the last monster you killed, which will be your mitigation against that damage numbers, or how that percent is actually going to be portrayed, because the percent here is not really that accurate, which I think Dreamcore's going to mention, because of the fact that the harder the enemy hits, the less you're going to mitigate.
issue with this type of estimation is that armor doesn't provide a fixed amount of mitigation, as it's stronger against smaller hits and much weaker against bigger hits. Moving on to evasion now, and we have essentially the same type of thing going on here with the estimated evade chance. It's putting your evasion rating against an average monster's accuracy rating at your character level to determine evade chance. It's also stated here that evasion grants a chance to avoid enemy strikes or projectiles. And then we have a block chance, which is listed a lot more prominently in the PoE 2 character sheet compared to PoE 1, which I'm a big fan of. Chance to block incoming projectiles and strikes, causing them to deal no damage. And it says here that some larger and more dangerous enemy attacks cannot be blocked. We know that those larger abilities will be telegraphed with a red flash, and they typically have long wind-ups too. And I think that this disclaimer here about the hits that can't be blocked should also be added to the evasion description, as we know that those same hits will be unevadable by default as well. Next up, there's the resistance tooltips. These all read the same except for their specific resistance type. You take this much less damage, negative values cause you to take more damage instead, and maximum resistance is capped at 75% by default and cannot be higher than 90%. So no changes there mechanically from PoE 1. The percentage on the left is your capped resistance, and the percentage in brackets is uncapped resistance. Now, scrolling down, there's a more detailed breakdown for each of the stats shown at the top, and some extra information here like regeneration. At the bottom of the character sheet here, there's some new sections which we don't have in PoE 1. Stun, ailments, damage avoidance, damage taken, damage redirection, and reflected damage.
I will point out, I've played the PoE 2 multiple times, but none of us really went into this. I don't think we even had access to this window in some of the playtests, as it wasn't ready. I don't know if I had access to this in the last playtest. I don't think so.
I think both stun and ailments will list specific defenses that you have for those types, such as increased stun threshold or reduced duration of ignite on you, for example. Damage avoidance will list any specific modifiers that grant you a chance to avoid a damage type from hits. Damage taken will list all of the modifiers you have which impact the damage that you take, such as Fortify for less hit damage taken, or Shock for increased damage taken. Damage redirection will list modifiers for damage taken as, which makes you take the damage of one type as another type, such as the modifier on Cloak of Flame. Lastly, we have reflected damage, which should be listing any modifiers that you have to reduce reflected damage taken. Okay, so that's the character sheet in PoE 2, but what information can we decipher from this sheet? I went through all of my footage to collect information about all of the stats that I was gaining from gear and from the passive skill tree at the time of this character sheet screenshot. And with that information, I was able to calculate a bunch of stats. Let's look at attributes first. We know that in PoE 1, each class has their own allocation of starting attributes, and it looks like it's going to be the same in PoE 2. From both gear and the passive tree, I had no intelligence modifiers, but I had plus 15 to dexterity and plus 45 to strength. So the warrior's starting attributes therefore must be 15 strength, 7 dexterity and 7 intelligence. Next, let's look at life. On this screenshot I have 440 life on a level 20 character. I also have 60 strength, and we know that in PoE 2, each point of strength grants 2 maximum life. My gear had a total of plus 44 to maximum life, and I had no life modifiers on the passive skill tree. 60 strength is 120 maximum life.
There is very, very, very few nodes on the tree that gives increased life, by the way. There's a couple, but that's it. On the entire tree.
So by removing the added life from gear and strength, we end up with 276 life. Now, we know that in PoE 1, each character has the same amount of starting base life and mana, which is then added to any of those stats that they gain from their attributes, and they also gain an amount of flat life and mana per level up. So a level 20 character would have 19 instances of life gained from leveling up, and with that information, from 276 life, we can arrive at the base starting life of 48, with 12 life gained per level for every class, which would mean that with a warrior's 15 starting strength factored in, they'd start with 78 life in total. Okay, what about mana? I had 167 mana on a level 20 character. I also had 7 intelligence, and we know that each intelligence point grants 2 maximum mana. My gear had a total of plus 43 to maximum mana, and I had no mana modifiers on the passive skill tree. 7 intelligence is 14 maximum mana, so by removing the added mana from gear and intelligence, we end up with 110 mana. And from there we can arrive at a base starting mana of 34, with 4 mana gained per level for every class. Which would mean that with a warrior's 7 starting intelligence factored in, they'd start with 48 mana in total. Now, mana also has a base percentage of regeneration, which is 1.8% in PoE 1, but it appears to be significantly higher in PoE 2. With my 167 mana, I had 8.2 mana regenerated per second, and I only had one modifier to mana regeneration, which was this one on my amulet, 23% increased mana regeneration rate, which means that the base regeneration rate for mana in PoE 2 is 4%. I would guess that this is higher because modifiers that add to the base regeneration rate will be either extremely rare or possibly even non-existent, and it may be the case that modifiers that increase...
So I just want to point out with this video, like, I like this a lot. I know a lot of you guys watching here live on Twitch right now on YouTube like this because we all love spreadsheets in PoE. For anyone that's new to PoE coming in watching this that might not like this type of information, trust me, you're gonna learn. Okay, you're gonna learn to love this. PoE is a lot about numbers. Like, if you really want to deep dive and learn all the intricate mechanics and everything, stuff like this is very, very, very interesting and fun to learn because it also weaves into how you can design your character when it comes to min-maxing and optimizing your characters.
Increased mana regeneration rate, like the one on the amulet, are scarcer or generally have lower modifier values. Okay, lastly, we have Energy Shield, from which we can obtain the base Energy Shield recharge rate. I had 30 Energy Shield in total on my character, all coming from gear, and I had no modifiers anywhere on my gear or on the passive skill tree that interacts with Energy Shield recharge rate. I had 3.8 Energy Shield recharge per second, which would calculate to a base Energy Shield recharge rate of 12.5% per second. On this one, we're able to do a bit of a cross...
That is nothing. Yo, he said that in the bottom, you guys can't see it because of my overlay there. PoE 1 base recharge is 33.3%. Very interesting. Like, they're gutting that down.
Cross-check with the character sheet shown in Ziggy D's video. Now, I don't know if Ziggy D had any modifiers to Energy Shield recharge rate, but his shown recharge of 3.6 per second with 29 total ES would also come out at 12.5%. Ziggy D's footage is also more recent than mine, as his was from his playtime while he was at the GGG offices for the livestream reveal. Now, I will mention here at the end of this video that all of the stats shown here could change prior to the early access launch, or even during early access, as balance changes are likely to be made frequently. But hopefully this was useful for info on some of those base stats. I think the base mana regen rate and base ES recharge rate are the most interesting. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.
Thanks so much, Dreamcore, for the video. Appreciate that very much. Let me link it in the Twitch and YouTube chat here real quick. Again, leave a comment to help boost the algorithm. Give me some love, boys. This information is so good. Like, really, really good to use when it comes to min-maxing and designing your characters. Like, the fact that the ES recharge is only 12.5%, like, it's 33.3 in PoE 1. That's a massive difference. So what the ES recharge does, for those of you unaware, is that if you have energy shield, let's say you have 1,000 energy shield, and you go down to 500 energy shield, and then you don't take damage because you don't, unless you have regens or leech mechanic to it, you have to take 0 damage on your energy shield for the next 4 seconds. After that, your ES recharge begins, and the ES recharge is telling you how much per second you're gonna get during that window, and it will be interrupted if you take any damage to it. So in the example of 1,000 energy shield, and you go down to 500. After 4 seconds, you're going to start recharging your energy shield, which in this case would be 125 energy shield per second. So it will take you, 3-4 seconds to get yourself max energy shield again. It's quite interesting to see this because it's very different. In PoE 1, that would be, 1.5 seconds for that to bump right up real fast. So the ES recharge in PoE 1 is extremely fast, whereas in PoE 2, it's much, much slower. What else did I miss here to start? My fiance came in earlier here in the start, was it? It was the spirit part. This is for the buffs, or auras, if you will, and minions, of course. And there are ways to increase your spirit through like scepter. There's reservation stuffs, for example, for minions, Lord of the Necromancer, or Lord of the Dark, or something, Lord of Darkness. I think the note is called on the skill tree that will help mitigate how much reservation on the resources spirit you're gonna have when you're doing that, which is available on the skill tree. For example, you can get +2 maximum spirit either from permanent buffs from killing certain bosses in the in the campaign, as well as in on your gear, like scepters, for example. I like this type of information because it gives us the baseline mechanics of how things work so that we can utilize that information when we design builds or if you want to min-max your character. So understanding these things is quite important for min-max purposes. However, if you are a newer player to the game, you don't have to know these things. If you're following a build guide, you go for it. You can just wing it and have fun. This is more of a thing that's kind of the kind of information we would like when it comes to min-maxing things and optimizing the build to go from, this is 80% min-max to I've done everything I possibly can to make sure this is as optimal as I can make it. Then that's the part where you would like to understand these mechanics. Again, big shout out to Dreamcore for this video. It's solid. I haven't seen anyone else do this. So this is actually, in my opinion, very valuable information for the min-maxers and the ARPG veterans out there. Again, if you like the video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content, leave a comment down below on this video, but also go over to Dreamcore's video, link to the descriptions below, to give him some love as well, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. So till then, stay safe, keep rocking.